Her scar had once been a mark of ruin. Now it was the seal of her reign. But in the halls of power, enemies wear smiles sharper than swords. As Illyra takes her place as queen, betrayal waits at her own bloodline, and the marches themselves may not survive the price of truth. Morning pressed against the fortress with a cold clarity that left nowhere to hide. Illyra woke to the light lying thin across the stone, and the circlet's trace still faint on her brow. The veil remained folded on the table where she had left it, a relic of a life small enough to fold. She did not touch it. A soft knock. When she opened the door, Veynar stood in the corridor, cloak thrown loosely about his shoulders, his hair not yet bound. He did not smile. He rarely did. But something in his gaze steadied. "Walk with me," he said. They moved through passages that smelled of coal smoke and wet stone. The fortress was awake but quiet, like a great thing breathing before it spoke. In a small solar, Illyra set the oilcloth bundle on the table. She had not let it out of her sight since the rider pressed it into her hands the day before. Veynar nodded toward it. "The rider brought you proof, the cloth, the ledger. What do you mean to do with it?" Illyra smoothed the sheet. Her father's hand leapt from the page, precise, tidy, unyielding. Losses to bandits, season after season. 30 sacks here, 2 chests there. Losses do not march like soldiers, she thought. They spill like rain. These figures were too neat to be true. "If I show it," she said, "they'll call me ungrateful, a daughter eager to ruin her kin." "If I show it," he said, "they'll call me a king who hides behind his bride's scars." His voice stayed even. "Let them accuse, but the page must be seen." Her hand trembled. He set his palm on the table near hers, close enough to steady her without forcing contact. "I will not spare him because he is your blood," he said, "but neither will I use you to wound him. This choice is yours." Illyra drew a breath that tasted of iron. The fear had edges, but it also had a shape. "Then let them see it. In my hand." Approval flickered along his features and vanished like heat. "The war priest will witness. The court will hear you." Silence stretched between them, taut and not unpleasant. Illyra's gaze drifted to the pale seam along his forearm, the old wound he had shown her before. Without thinking, she reached and traced the air just above it, respecting the boundary she knew he honored in her. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. "Only when it rains," he said, then lower. "And when fools mistake scars for weakness," she almost smiled. "Then both of us ache in storms." His hand lifted, paused. When she did not turn away, his thumb brushed the unscarred line of her cheek, brief, careful, enough to quiet the shake in her breath. "Stand with me today," he said. "I will," she whispered, "and I will not break." They left the solar. On the gallery that overlooked the inner court, they paused at a narrow slit of a window. The yard below was already in motion. Buckets passing, hooves striking sparks, a boy chasing a stray hen with saintly patience. Ordinary life, Illyra thought, the thing all this noise is meant to protect. She felt Veynar's presence as a warmth at her shoulder, not pressing, not absent. She let her hand find his for a heartbeat, palm to palm, then released him. The contact was nothing a court would gossip about, and everything she needed. "Whatever happens at the table," he said, "remember you are not the sum of a ledger, and you are not the sum of your father." "I know," she said, "but today I must prove it to people who prefer easy sums." "Then give them a different arithmetic." She huffed a breath that almost became a laugh. "You always sound like a man who can count." "I can," he said, "especially on you." They walked on. The council chamber breathed with tension. Nobles lined the long table, whispers running like mice. The war priest stood to one side, iron ring heavy on his belt. Lady Maylene smiled, as if the storm belonged to her. The carrion-eyed lord leaned forward with the patience of a vulture. Illyra entered with Veynar, chin high, the ledger page in her hand. She wore the iron circlet, but no veil. Murmurs rose, then thinned when she laid the page on the table. "These numbers," she said, voice clear enough to find every corner. "Repeat too neatly. 30 sacks lost every season, 2 chests every year. Famine does not march in step. Either the bandits kept ledgers, or men at this table did." A hiss rippled. The carrion-eyed lord sneered. "Majesty, is this how a queen behaves, scratching sums like a clerk?" "A queen feeds her people," Illyra said. "And numbers tell us who steals from their mouths." Lady Maylan's tone was silk on steel. "So quick to accuse. Will you next tell us your father lit the fire that scarred you?" Every gaze turned. Illyra's throat tightened. She did not flinch. "My father's books speak louder than I do. If they shame him, that is his doing, not mine." A southern lord tried another angle. "Majesty, the queen is new to her seat. Let us not mistake inexperience for evidence." Captain Core, who didn't love words, said simply, "We scraped the mud." He tapped the strip of South March green and silver. That shut several mouths. Illyra felt the room like a weather front. She did not let it move her. "Bring your ledgers," she said. "Every house, every roadmaster's tally. If the pattern is only in South March, the truth will show it. If it spreads wider, then the rot is not one man, but many. Let us see who profits from hunger." That, more than accusation, stirred the chamber into noise. Veynar's voice cut it. "At twilight," he said, "those named in the accounts will stand in this hall, witnessed." The war priest inclined his head, iron ring heavy in his grasp. The scribe marked the hour. The nobles spilled out, some already pale with calculation, others smirking at the thought of another man's fall. When the chamber emptied, Illyra stayed, her pulse loud in the stone. Veynar came to her side. He did not speak at first. His hand touched the back of her neck, light, steady. "You stood," he said. "I bent," she whispered, "and you did not break." She leaned into his touch for the briefest moment. "Stay. I will." They did not kiss then. But when he lowered his forehead to hers, the silence that followed was not weakness, not fear. It was shelter. Twilight bled red across the banners when her father arrived, late by a measured insult. His bow was perfect, his smile precise. His gaze slid from Illyra to the king as if tracing a route on a map that avoided anything human. "We have found your figures," Veynar said. "Read them for us." The war priest held the page open. Her father's eyes flicked over the numbers. "Clerks err, bandits strike, grain is lost. These things happen." "Your hand," Illyra said. "Not a clerk's." He turned, voice a blade wrapped in silk. "Daughter, you risk shaming the blood that kept you." "Do not call me daughter to make this room small," she said. "The marches hear us." He sighed, the sound of practiced patience. "You never understood what it takes to keep an estate. Losses stumble," she cut in. "They spill. They do not repeat with the neatness of your pen." A clerk stammered under Captain Core's questions. A farmer blurted that one wagon was cut loose at the alder tree. Never 30 sacks. Finally, the roadmaster's nerves snapped. Sweat gleamed at his temples. "The pattern calms the court," he said hoarsely. "My lord said the king expects it. I wrote what I was told." "Which lord?" Veynar asked, soft as snow. The man's eyes stuck to Illyra's father. "South March," he whispered. Sound swelled, then hushed itself. Lady Maylan's smile thinned to wire. The carrion-eyed lord adjusted his expression by degrees. Her father's mask cracked and reformed in a breath. "You would slander me with the babble of frightened peasants?" Illyra stepped closer. "You slander yourself with ink. I counted the fields. I remember the harvests. I know what we lost and what we did not." For the first time, soldiers in the hall shifted, not against her, but toward her. One fist struck breastplate, another followed. A slow tide of iron loyalty rose. Veynar's voice carried like thunder kept in check. "The guilty will pay in coin, in grain, in work, and if need be, in exile. The marches will eat." He glanced to Illyra, not for permission, but for partnership. "Queen," her voice cut clean, "exile starves pride longer than a rope, but the fields must be counted, the children must eat. That is justice." The war priest touched the iron ring at his belt. "Witnessed." Her father stared as if a stranger had spoken through her mouth. "You would starve your blood for these people." "I would feed my people even if it starves my pride," she said. "Blood that steals is brine, not balm." He bowed stiffly, mask remade, but the room had already judged him. When the hall emptied, Illyra's strength withdrew enough to let her sit. The circlet's weight felt honest on her brow. The place where her veil used to chafe felt strangely free. Veynar came beside her, resting his hand lightly at the back of her neck. His thumb brushed once, gently, across the edge of her scar. "You stood," he said. "I bent," she answered, "but I did not break." "You won't," he said, "not while I remember how to count." That almost made her laugh. Instead, she let her eyes close, leaning into the steady pressure of his hand. "Stay," she whispered. "I will," he said. And so they sat together in the quiet, the fortress holding its breath for dawn. Dawn climbed the fortress like a careful hand placing light where it was needed. Frost silvered the inner court. The banners held still as if listening. When the bell tolled the hour, Illyra was already awake. She stood by the narrow window, the circlet on the table beside the folded veil. She touched both, then set the circlet firmly on her brow. The veil she left behind. A knock. Veynar opened the door at her word. He wore no mantle, only dark wool and a leather baldric, the simplicity that reminded men he'd once been only a captain with a stubborn heartbeat. He didn't ask if she was ready. His gaze read the answer and nodded to it. "Walk with me," he said. They crossed the cloister in air that tasted of iron and mint from the herb court. Soldiers were already posted at the gates, the steward already counting sacks, the war priest already binding oaths to ink. The fortress moved like a body with purpose. Illyra and Veynar moved with it. At the threshold to the great hall, he paused, not to block her, but to make space the way a good door swings wide. "Do you wish me to speak the sentence?" he asked. "Or will you?" Illyra looked at the empty chairs, the long table, the priest's iron ring dull in the dawn. She heard, faintly, children laughing in some yard beyond the wall where frost had not bitten through yet. "They must learn my voice," she said, quiet but certain. "Today of all days." "Good," Veynar said. And because it mattered, he added without weight, "I will stand near." The council gathered beneath banners that had watched kings crowned and kings buried. Nobles seated themselves, captains lined the walls, scribes bent their quills. Lady Malin arrived draped in courtesy. The carrion-eyed lord wore an expression polished to neutrality. Her father stood with the southern lords, spine straight, chin set, the posture of a man who still believed pride could keep a roof from caving. The war priest raised his iron ring. "Witness," he said. "Testimony has been given. Yesterday the roadmaster, clerks, and drivers spoke under oath. The page was shown. The colors were laid on the table. Truth has been spoken. Today we judge." Illyra stepped forward, laying the ledger page where all could see. Her voice carried through the chamber. "The evidence has been heard. The proof is before us. The marches, the borderlands we rule, must now hear the sentence." Her father's mouth curved with trained poise. "Majesty," he said to Veynar, because habit dies slow. "The roads have been lawless. Figures repeat because thieves grow bold. Shall I hang the river next for flooding in straight lines? Illyra did not flinch. You will not hang rivers. You will answer for hunger you turned into arithmetic. The court splits. A southern lord pushed his chair back, cloak rustling like restless wings. Majesty, the queen is new to her seat. Let us not mistake inexperience for evidence. If this becomes our precedent, any tallying hand might accuse his master. Whispers broke, some sharp with agreement, others heavy with doubt. Captain Core, who didn't love words, rose. He tapped the strip of Southmarch green and silver cloth, charred but clear. We scraped this from the mud. The blunt certainty of his tone silenced more than a speech could. Lady Malin seized the pause. Majesties, what serves the marches now? Division? Hunger is fed by storehouses, not trials. Show mercy, levy a fine, and let Southmarch restore its reputation without spectacle. Mercy, Illyra said evenly, is bread in bowls, not apologies in halls. The carrion-eyed lord leaned forward, his voice like frost. Majesty, he said to Veynar, if exile is the price for stealing from kings, what do we charge for stealing from queens? It was meant to belittle, to make Illyra a lesser sovereign. Veynar did not rise. He only turned his head toward Illyra, inviting the hall to listen where he listened. Her voice cut like a blade, honed on survival. Queens are not stolen from. Queens stand and take back what is theirs. That struck the air like flint to stone. Some nobles shifted uneasily. Others stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Veynar spread his hand across the table, anchoring the moment. We do not hang men to make a point when fields need plowing. We do not pardon thieves because they have titles. The question before us is restoration. He looked to Illyra. In that simple look, he placed the weight where it belonged. She let silence ripen until the room leaned forward. Then she spoke. By witness of priest and council, by oath of king and queen, the sentence is exile for the Lord of Southmarch, she said. His lands will pass to the crown for 1 year and a winter to restore what was stolen. His granaries will be opened and counted under the priest's seal. His silver will repair bridges and pay wages for road guards. Any lord whose books repeat such neat losses will answer likewise. The words settled heavy. No roar, no applause, only the stillness that follows a bell when all know what hour it is. Her father's mask held, though tight at the seams. Exile for a scribe's error, he said. Exile for famine turned into numbers that suited your hand, Illyra answered. You turned hunger into comfort for yourself. We turn you into distance that feeds others. The war priest pressed iron to parchment. Witnessed. The soldiers at the walls shifted, armor groaning, and then, deliberately, fists struck breastplates, not in riot, but in rhythm, a tide rising. Veynar's voice rolled like thunder contained. The guilty will pay in coin, in grain, in work, and in pride. The marches will eat. He glanced at Illyra. Queen? She did not falter. Justice is not spectacle, it is bread. The hall exhaled like a beast satisfied. The steward stepped forward with lists, scribes sealed ledgers, the priest closed his book. Guards moved her father toward the door. He bowed stiffly, mask remade, but the room had already judged him. When the hall emptied, Illyra's strength withdrew enough to let her sit. The circlet's weight felt honest on her brow. The place where her veil used to chafe felt strangely free. Veynar came beside her, resting his hand lightly at the back of her neck. His thumb brushed once, gently, across the edge of her scar. You spoke, he said. You let me, she answered. I will always let you. He bent a little, like a tree toward a favored wind. He didn't kiss her in the hall. He touched his forehead to hers, a gesture private even with stone watching. We will stand together, he murmured. And if I fall, she asked, then I fall with you, and we rise. Later, in the West Tower chamber where dust turned to gold in the light, He kissed her. Not ravenous, not tentative. Certain. It was the language they had been writing toward since the first day she stood unveiled in the yard. "I chose you," he said, when their foreheads rested together. "Not in spite of your scar, because it told me you would endure." She touched the seam on his wrist. "Then we endure together." "Together," he said. Winter passed with work. Spring came honest. Rains, sun, wind that carried rosemary. The roads stayed open. Storehouses fed villages. Children laughed in streets where last year silence had been louder. In the market square, bakers set out steaming loaves. Music threaded through the stalls. Illyra walked beside Veynar, no veil, circlet catching the sun. Faces turned toward her scar, but not in pity, in proof. A woman pressed a loaf into Illyra's hands, then wept into her sleeve. A boy stared until Illyra bent, showed him the wolf track marks cut into the crust, and told him bread knew how to find children who needed it. He ran off grinning, loaf clutched like treasure. Veynar's hand slipped into hers, as it always did. Then, slowly, deliberately, he set his other hand against her belly where the gown curved faintly with promise. The square saw. A sound moved through the crowd like soil turned by a plow, deep, rich, ready. Some made the sign against ill luck, others simply smiled. Illyra laid her hand over his and lifted her chin. The scar caught the light and did not apologize. She was no longer the ash bride. She was the queen who had turned ash into bread and into life. Veynar bent to her ear, voice meant for her alone. "You were never the ruin. You were the fire that would not go out." She kissed his cheek in plain sight, claiming him as much as he had claimed her. "And you were the man who knew how to bank a fire so it warms instead of burns." The crowd began to chant, their names rising like song. The war priest, watching from a balcony, touched his iron ring and whispered, "Witnessed." Illyra pressed her palm to her belly, Veynar's hand still steady over hers. Between them, a promise moved, small and insistent as a fist. Ash had been the language of her beginning. Bread was the language of her reign, and the child she carried would be the proof that both were true. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.